Morning, members. It is the appointed time for the meeting. First, let me call the meeting to order because we have a quorum. Any nominations for chairmanship? Yes. I'd like to nominate Mr. Edward Lau. We have seconders. Mr. Lau, do you accept nomination? I do. Any other nominations? If not, what? Do we need to take a vote? Because there is only one nomination, and he accepts nomination. Please take the chair.
呢個主席唔俾請假㗎。
好啊，好啊，咁啊，想問下大家。
Let's ask you, do we need a deputy chairman? You don't think so? Okay. I nominate Mr. Kwok Wai Keung. Okay, we have a nomination. Mr. Kwok Wai Keung. Any seconder? Mr. Ibrahim Shek. Mr. Kwok, do you accept nomination? Well, why not? Any other nominations? Any other nominations? Okay. If not, I'll declare that Mr. Kwok Wai Keung has been elected Deputy Chairman to the Joint Committee to follow up issues relating to the redevelopment, maintenance and management of aged buildings, ipso facto. Tabled. You have a letter from Mr. Junius Ho requesting to join the joint committee. Can I please ask you whether you approve this application? If yes, welcome to you, Mr. Junius Ho. No objection.
Okay,
let us look at meeting arrangements and items for discussion. Members, do you have any particular views on the agenda items proposed? Mr. Vincent Zhang. I don't know whether these can be included under this joint subcommittee. First, about urban renewal. We have been talking about Yau Mong projects, which should be demand-led. Can we talk about the urban renewal strategies of the URA? We know that there is a redevelopment project in Yau Ma Tei, and we'd like to add in some social welfare elements. Secondly, the role of the Home Affairs Department. I know it is helping with management. Their liaison officers would sit in at MAC or OC meetings. I'd like to review the role of the HAD and the liaison officers. And also I'd like to talk about the water seepage joint office. I'd like to review its work performance. Well, this is the subcommittee, joint subcommittee to follow up on issues relating to the redevelopment, maintenance and management of aged buildings. I think the 3 points you mentioned can very legitimately be included on the agenda of this joint subcommittee. I'll talk to the clerk after the meeting to see whether we can arrange for those 3 items to be taken up at the next meeting. Mr. Wilson Orr. Thank you, Chair. Chairman, This is already included in our work plan from A to G. I think we like the URA and the HAD can be asked to tackle certain items. I'm talking about support for CAP 334 and particularly MACs and OCs in old buildings. And I'd like to know the role of the HAB and secondly, the water seepage office. Well, we are not having very good progress. We have not been able to get to any results. I'd like to know whether these can be advanced. Indeed, management and maintenance of aged buildings is indeed a problem. We will ask the relevant bureaus and departments to come to our meetings. Mr. Tommy Zheng, Chairman, I hope would like to take up compulsory auction threshold for redevelopment of old buildings. Can we please give priority to this item? But of course, I know members have different concerns, but I hope this one can be listed in our agendas as soon as possible. Okay, I will talk to the relevant bureaus and departments with the deputy chairman to see how we can give an order to these items. Mr. Xiuka-chen, thank you. I just gave you a letter listing 11 items that I think should be discussed. I won't read them out, but the letter is with you. However, there are two which I think should warrant special attention. Two, and that is an integrated way to manage 3 new buildings before they have an OC. Secondly, compensation by URA on owners, tenants, and non-residents in URA projects, because I have received a lot of views from residents. I like to give priority to these two, and I like to hold public hearings on these two as well. I don't know whether members have a copy of this letter. It will be copied to you. And again, I will take this up with the Bureau to see when we can attend to these items. Mr. Ben Chan, Chairman. I'd like to talk about really old buildings when it is said that seawater has been mixed with concrete in these buildings. I would say there should be a data bank on the concrete composition of old buildings, and we should take samples to check the concrete of old buildings on a regular basis. And then we can chart a direction for the redevelopment of such buildings. And then on redevelopment, perhaps we will talk about compensation for people affected. And then someone mentioned 3 new buildings. And I'd like to talk about the management. Very early on, you said that you might like to manage some old buildings as a group. And I'd like to talk about that kind of management mode. Okay. Mr. Kwok Wai-kwang, Deputy Chairman. Thank you, Chair. I agree that we should discuss the situation of 3 new buildings. Most of them are old. They are really like tenement buildings. In preparing for maintenance and repair, these buildings usually meet up with a lot of problems. I think we should take that up. And secondly, I'd like to talk about progress of redevelopment throughout the territory. We'd like to invite academics here to do an analysis for us. Looking at the present progress, can we catch up with the situation in buildings and whether there will be a peak, and if there indeed is going to be a peak, how can we get prepared for it? This would be much more desirable than having to face a situation where there is structural safety problem in a whole lot of buildings. I see a lot of members are concerned about 3 new buildings. We'll talk to the Bureau to see whether we can take this up ASAP. Indeed, many old buildings are also 3-nil buildings. We'd like to talk about their redevelopment and maintenance. Mr. Andrew Wen. Thank you, Chair. I support all the ideas raised. I'd like to add to them. First, 3-nil buildings. Apart from discussing the issue, I believe the government should be more proactive in playing a supportive role. We may receive complaints and then we go to the HAD. Well, no one there can help. I think there is a big gap in the policies here. And then about urban renewal, apart from the work of the URA, I think there are 2 other points. First, compensation. 2, the role of URA. I think that has been rather controversial in society in the last few years. Well, it is now acting like a contract developer and it is engaging itself in a lot of public-private partnership. But can it play another role of providing housing? And then we have the smart tender scheme. I know that there is an exemption mechanism under it. What should I say? Before you apply for smart tender, you must follow all the procedures. And in fact, before the tender is called, now they are providing an exemption mechanism. Now, would that lead to a hotbed for tender rigging? About CAP 344, we should talk about it and how we can help OCs to be set up and give them long-term support. The HAB is very passive and you are left to try to interpret the ordinance yourselves. I know many members here are providing support to OCs in the districts. I think it's not just up to us. The HAB, HAD should do something, but if you have worked with them, they will know that we will just act according to the law. I think they should play a more proactive role. Thank you. Okay. Yes, that's right. We will cover the development panel and HA panel since we are a joint subcommittee. Members also mentioned the URA and its role. We'll definitely invite the URA to come and discuss its work with us. Next, Tony Chair. Thank you, Chairman. First, I'd like to clarify something and what we mean by old buildings and aged buildings. In English, we are using the word aged. Members have talked about aged buildings, but I don't really know what kind of buildings you are really talking about and the age of the buildings. You mentioned water seepage and compulsory auction. The law stipulates the age of buildings before they can be subject to these schemes. I'd like members to clarify that. Say, if we set a certain age, it may not be very proper. I don't know. Maybe you have thought about this before. Secondly, many members seemed to have focused their attention on residential buildings. But as Mr. Shokachan was saying, there are non-residential buildings. My feeling is that members are more concerned about residential buildings. It is because you have seen a lot of problems in these residential buildings. But in fact, talking about management and maintenance, there are shopping malls that were built long time ago, and there are a lot of problems with these malls now. Can we also spare some attention for that? Talking about water seepage, it doesn't only happen in aged buildings. Sometimes it happens in buildings with 10 or 8 years of age.
Thank you, Mr. Tony Chair. Thank you for your comments. I think when it comes to aged buildings, we usually think about private standalone residential buildings. Is there a definition of aged buildings, well, it may not be a good thing to have a definition. We should look at the problems rather than focusing specifically on the age limit. Just like the previous scheme, we argued about whether the age limit should be set at 60 or 65. Mr. Lam Shuk Ting. The terms of reference of this joint subcommittee is very important because the building stock in Hong Kong is aging rapidly, and I support members' ideas. I think we should follow up on these matters, especially our effort in combating bid rigging. We understand that the URA's Smart Tender Rehabilitation Scheme has been put in place for more than a year. Many residential buildings have taken part in the scheme. We're at the stage of building inspection. We have yet to tender out contracts. I'd like to invite the URA to come and explain to us their preliminary assessment on the effectiveness of Smart Tender Scheme and their work of review. Second point, Chairman, when it comes to maintenance, redevelopment of aged buildings, I think elderly owners are the most affected group, and very often these elderly owners are helpless. Bid rigging involves a lot of government departments, including the Home Affairs Department, Police, RCAC, Buildings Department, Urban Renewal Authority, as well as the Competition Commission. Chairman, in due course, when we discuss the relevant matters, I think you should invite representatives from all public bodies and government departments related to the issue so that we can have collaboration among them to give the best protection to the concerned owners so that they won't be deprived of their savings by unscrupulous contractors. Mr. Abraham Shack. This topic covers a very wide scope, and I think fellow members already pointed out a number of issues. But after all, we need to focus on aged buildings, especially redevelopment of aged buildings. And I think a number of government departments are involved, namely Development Bureau, Housing Authority, followed by the Housing Society. So you should make a start here. When it comes to private buildings, we can invite the URA as well. We need to get a clear understanding of the aged buildings involved, where the redevelopment will take place. We need to invite them to come and explain their strategy, their relevant strategies and their 5-year plan, for example, before we look into other issues such as water seepage. Like Mr. Shiu said, we have more than 10 issues stemming from this, and we need to devise a strategy. Otherwise, we will just hold meetings without any meaning. We'll be losing focus on how to really tackle problems. So we need to get an understanding of the comprehensive strategy on redevelopment and maintenance. For example, the URA, as well as the Housing Authority, Housing Society, they all have their different maintenance and redevelopment strategies. So I think it is important to get an understanding from them in order to formulate our own strategy. Thank you. I think you mentioned the Hong Kong Housing Society, Housing Authority, as well as the Urban Renewal Authority. However, I think the vulnerable groups would be those living in private buildings or three without buildings. So we should first invite the URA to come and explain their objectives. We can also invite the HA and the Hong Kong Housing Society because they also undertake redevelopment of aged housing estates. However, these are public housing estates, I think there is better support for the owners, for the tenants. So that will be our priority of work. Second round, Mr. Kwok Wai Ko. Members threw out a lot of ideas just now. Perhaps we need to work for 2 full years. Well, you can prioritize the items, Chairman. But let me make this suggestion about management of aged buildings when it comes to acquisition. I understand that when acquisition takes place, the management of aged buildings will deteriorate rapidly so as to drive owners or tenants away. Well, I think that there should be proper management of aged buildings even in these circumstances. You cannot, for example, suspend lift services. Second point, Chairman. I'd like to know whether this includes public housing. Because there is a problem facing private and public buildings, that is asbestos. Well, the government's approach is that if the building is intact, it can remain in the community, and that also applies to public housing, even with the presence of asbestos. I am concerned that since we do not have a lot of contractors undertaking the removal of asbestos, their price may be jacked up, and I think that they should be removed as soon as possible. So when it comes to removal or treatment of asbestos in the public or private buildings, we need to have a strategy. Well, yes, we can give it a thought, especially when asbestos is found in the Prince of Wales Hospital. We have gathered a lot of issues already. We have a 1-year term for this joint subcommittee. So I think our next step is to approach the Home Affairs Bureau and the Development Bureau together with Deputy Chair and work out our list of items. And we need to prioritize certain items. Management of 3 new buildings, for example, this is an issue close to the heart of members, so we need to discuss it. And we'll work out the timetable, and afterwards we'll inform the Secretariat of our agenda and dates of meetings, and these will be circulated to members. Moving on to next item, any other business? Anything on the AOB? If not, meeting's adjourned. Thank you.